Look at this ham. So this took about an hour and a half to line up for and cost close to 10,000 pesos. It's really briny, salty. That cure penetrated the meat completely. As you can see, it's completely pink, and that intense flavor is really there. So this is something that takes a lot of work and a lot of time to get to. Ham and Noche Buena go hand in hand in the Philippines. No table is complete without it. Excelente has been in business since the 50s and is one of the most prominent ones. The flavor is very smoky and salty, but it's something lots of people look for either to eat at home or gift to friends. Now in December, these are really hard to get. Curing a ham is really important. It's actually an old method in terms of making sure you're preserving the meat so it doesn't spoil with a mix of sugar and salt. Something that's bone-in like this and that's quite heavy, I'm saying maybe this is like 4 or 5 kilos, would take about 30 days to cure properly. The rule of thumb is for every 500 gram of pork, you should count about 2 days of cure. Now, it's mid-December, which means you don't have a lot of time if you want to make your own ham at home. In the UK, they do something called like a bake or roasted ham, which is basically a huge ham butt like this or leg that is boiled for about 2 to 3 hours, and then it's actually baked or roasted. So that is actually no curing whatsoever. You could also do a wet brine or even inject brine inside of your ham to try to achieve kind of like this color that you see over here. This year, I want to try out a short cure. So something in between a British baked roasted ham and a cured ham. We're just gonna do a dry brine for 7 days and see how far we get. I really don't think we'll get pinkness throughout, but we will get some of that flavor, and more importantly, it'll just keep everything nice and moist as we cook it. More importantly though, I wanna show you how to do a 24-hour pork belly ham that honestly is good enough on its own. None of this would be possible without the help of the Glad family of products. This is something that I'm never without in my household. From storage bags to cook and bake paper, garbage bags, cling wrap, and aluminum foil. They even have a green line, which is really nice to see. These 2 recipes will show you that no kitchen should be without Glad. You want to make sure you can carefully weigh your pork so that you can get the curing mix ratios just right. For every 500 grams of bone-in pork leg or shoulder, use 27.5 grams of salt, 2.5 grams of Prague powder number 1, 2 grams of cane sugar or brown sugar, 2 grams of dextrose powder, 2 grams of black pepper, 1 gram of allspice, 1 gram of garlic powder, and 1 gram of onion powder. Make sure you rub it all over, inside and outside, just all over that big baby. To wrap it, we're gonna be using Glad Press and Seal. It's the best all-surface wrap with Grip-Tex, a proprietary gripping technology that allows the product to seal to plastic, paper, styrofoam, containers, metal, wood, and many other surfaces, and in our case, our pork. This goes in the fridge for at least a week. If you want this to go full pink, according to our previous calculations, you'd have to cure this one for about 25 days. We don't have that time. Ideally, you can hang it in the fridge, but if you can't, put it on a tray and just turn it around every other day. Here we are, December 9, so this was 7 days. Usually per kilo, you're gonna kind of have different times. Let's unwrap this baby. It's in the fridge. What happens is you start losing a little bit of water weight and you'll feel that it's really nice and firm, and that's exactly what we want. So from time to time, you're gonna need to drain it, remove some of the liquid that goes out. It's like a Christmas present already. Look at that. That looks intense. Probably doesn't look very pretty, but intense. So what we're gonna do now, and this is really important, we actually wanna wash this off. You see you have a kind of like a lot of that dry brine on there. We wanna wash that off as much as possible, and then we're gonna dry it out. For our cheat version, we're gonna be using some pork belly. Try to just get a nice evenly cut piece like this with kind of like nice marbling throughout. Now, this is definitely not a ham, but it's just more of, it gives you the feeling that it's a ham and kind of just is a shortcut vibe. I call it a vibe because it's really a completely different recipe, but if it's served, it'll remind people of kind of like a long cured Christmas ham, but just in like 1/10 of the time. So very simple. All we're gonna do is put this in our bags,
So I'm gonna be using the Glad Flex and Seal. And this is gonna be absolutely perfect to marinate our pork belly. What I really like is when you feel inside, it's rigid, which means it'll catch on to whatever protein you have in there. So it's much easier to push out the air that's in there and really compact that flavor. And when you're marinating, cutting off kind of like that access to oxygen is so important in terms of intensifying the flavor of your marinade inside your meat. For our marinade, very easy. Cinnamon sticks, a couple cloves, really kind of give us that Christmas vibe, and then some garlic. Mix that, keep it to the side. Take our bag, put our pork belly in. This is exactly what I mean. If it was just dry, look at this. You can kind of close that up. It already tightens up more than your regular kind of plastic bags. Put in our marinade, and then we're gonna grab some water, and this will really kind of just choke out the excess air that's in this bag. So as I press it down, the water constricts and pushes the air out. Kind of finish that off as much as possible. Then we can go ahead and close our Glad bag. And when I take this out, you should have a nice tight little package just like this. Mix it together, and then this goes into the fridge overnight. Nice and clean. We're now gonna pat it dry. Make sure to pat it dry all over. When you're making ham after brining, whether it's a wet brine or a dry brine, it's really important to dry. So not only pat dry your ham, but for anything that's cured, you need to kind of put it in the fridge exposed for at least 24 hours overnight. There's a term for it. It just escapes me now. I think it's called a pellicle or something like that. That's really important for ham in general. Remember, we're using a bone-in piece here. If you were using a boneless piece of ham, it would definitely change a lot of the timings that I'm giving you now. Now this goes in the fridge for at least 24 hours. Time for a glaze. Really important part of making a ham. You can make it very foreign, very Filipino, kind of mix things up. I'm gonna be making a mix of both. So I wanna do a half a cup of Dijon mustard. There's some tarragon in there already, so that's gonna bring a lot of flavor to the dish. We have some honey. I'm a huge sucker for honey mustard. It's probably one of my favorite dressings. A lot of people find it weird, but me, just this, it's already so delicious. To that, obviously we're gonna add some brown sugar. This is a really important part. Garlic powder, bit of allspice, when you start going a little more Asian. And then I have some kecap manis, so sweet soy. This is just gonna bring it to that next level. Thoroughly mix that together, give it a taste. That's delicious. Keep this aside. Pork belly is ready. I'm gonna go ahead and remove it, and then we're actually gonna start cooking it. Don't discard the solids that are in here, because we're also gonna be using that for the braise. If a couple of cloves and everything kind of hang on to it, no big dramas. We're gonna scoop out if you have too many cloves in there so it doesn't get too intense, and we're also gonna scoop out kind of like the cinnamon stick and the pieces of garlic. You can always add more if you want later. Bring that to a boil, and we're gonna add a bit more pineapple juice if we need it. And at this point, we haven't really added any kind of seasoning to it, so this is where I'm gonna add, I have some mushroom soy sauce. So this is gonna give it flavor, but also a nice darker color. Start with a little bit. You're so gross. Pork goes in, meat side down. Don't worry, we're gonna flip this around. It's gonna braise everything beautifully. It's gonna help us detach the skin later because we actually don't need that skin. And the sauce or the pineapple juice itself is gonna reduce into kind of like a more syrupy texture, and that's gonna be used for our glaze. So you're imparting really nice pork flavor to the pineapple juice, and then we're gonna add some sugar and everything to thicken everything up. So we'll see this in about an hour. Another switch out. We're gonna be eating a lot of pork today. You can see, really nice and dry. The skin's really tightened up. It's nice and dry. It's nice and kind of seized, and this is exactly what we want. Now, you could kind of like tie things together, but because this is kind of like a really gnarly piece, there's a bone running right through the middle. I don't really need to, and you don't have to worry too much about the skin because this skin actually comes off after a while. So this is gonna go in an oven at around 175 or 165 centigrade Celsius. for about 3 to 4 hours. So basically, it's with a bone, so it might take a bit longer to cook. We're just really trying to get that internal temp to around 130. And then we're gonna go ahead and take off the skin, and then we're gonna go place it back in. So I don't wanna ruin the sheet tray, so I'm gonna be using here our Glad Cook and Bake non-stick paper. Perfect size as well. Place that around on there. That way we have a nice clean drip later on. So this goes into the oven. Halfway through the cooking, you want to flip it so that you're rendering out a bit of the fat at the top as well. Then we're good to go. This feels really nice and tender. If you don't have an hour and a half to kill, you can always do that in a pressure cooker for about 45 minutes or 30 minutes even. So this sauce is fairly thick already. We're gonna add a little bit more sugar. This will help thicken it out further. And us Filipinos, we love kind of like a very thick, syrupy ham glaze. So you can kind of thicken this further out with some cornstarch, or honestly, if you're okay with something not like crazy sticky, you can kind of use this just with this texture here, which for me is actually pretty good already. So I don't know if I'm gonna use some cornstarch. At this point, obviously, make sure not to burn yourself, but you can taste it, add some soy sauce if you need some saltiness in there. That, for me, is actually pretty good already. I don't want it too thick. Awesome. We'll let that cool down a bit. So next, I know this might burn you, but it's always best to do it when it's still hot. We're gonna peel off the skin. Just find an area you can kind of come in, and it should come off. Here, it looks pretty good. You can probably keep this and make chicharron out of it or something, I don't know. And really, really carefully here, we're just gonna go ahead and score the fat. Then we're gonna take some brown sugar and then pack that on. Now, two things you can do now. Put it under a really, really hot broiler. If you torch it, you are gonna get kind of like a nice caramelization of the brown sugar, but you won't render out that fat cap a bit more. So I prefer putting it in a double broiler, but know that torching is a viable option. Since I am gonna put it on a double broiler, the last thing I want is to dry out the meat. So what I'm gonna do is kind of cup our pork with our Glad aluminum foil. So I'm using the 16 meters one, which is really long. Take our pork belly, and then we're gonna go ahead, fold everything into the side like this. Don't have to be too cute about it. It's really just to make sure we don't lose that juiciness that we've been working so hard for. And this goes on broil in our oven. Our ham doesn't look like much right now, obviously. It might even look like it's burnt, but don't worry, we're taking this whole part off. And in the Philippines, we don't really have kind of like these really pretty ham cuts when you go at the markets. So you make do with what we can get. So we're gonna go ahead and peel this skin off. It should come right off. And it's best to do it when it's hot. So if you see me struggling right now, it's because it's really hot. This could be like a crunchy lechon. That's not bad. A couple of things here. We'll do exactly the same thing as with the pork belly. Kind of score the fat where you can, really light. Take our glaze and gently put that on it. And this is gonna go into the oven. The temperature here is about 132 Fahrenheit. For the spots that look a little dark, what we can do is kind of wrap them with more Glad aluminum foil, just so that they don't darken or burn further. Kind of like a nice layer of protection. Back in the oven. That looks pretty. Let's pop the other one right in. This looks really good. And I feel like because we boiled it, it's really delicate, so you may want to make sure you don't break it either. Gorgeous. Still really juicy. You got a nice kind of sugary crust. Best way to eat this with some pan de sal. Stack up that beautiful piece of pork. Sauce goes on. Look at that. One big bite. Woo. Sideways. That is so rich and delicious. The sweetness and the softness of the pan de sal, this will forever be one of my favorite childhood kind of like memories, eating this Christmas morning. You should make this if you don't have a lot of time. All right, this guy looks massive. Move the foil carefully. It's really like unwrapping a present. See, the best part about using the Glaze Cook and Bake, if I hadn't used it, all of that, I would be cleaning all day long. That is just pure hard sugar. Here, I just have to remove it, and my sheet pan is clean. So I served you the pork belly in a traditional manner, which is the completely untraditional way of cooking it. Now, this is the traditional ham. This time we're gonna serve it in an untraditional way. So I love these kind of like little manteau buns, and I'm a huge fan of things like Peking duck. So all we're gonna do is cut these and kind of serve that like you would a Peking duck. Some ham, put that in there with our hoisin glaze, and just a little spring onion to kind of give you that bite of acidity that you really need for something this rich. Look at that. Let's try this out. So tender, really tasty. I think both of them are really great. So with that, try out these recipes. Let me know what you think, and happy holidays.